Welcome everyone to the Code with Jason meetup. Tonight we're going to be doing another one of them code reviews, this time with our friend Jonathan Bennett. Jonathan has a CRM application that he's been building, and Jonathan, you can probably give a better description of it, obviously, than I can. So if it's all right with you, I'll hand it over to you and you can kind of tee it up for us.
Sure. So, probably like most developers, I was using HubSpot and was frustrated with some stuff. So I was like, how hard is it to build your own CRM? So I started working on that, and it's mostly obviously a little bit tongue in cheek, but it is a great real application to kind of try out new techniques and use new technologies and stuff.
And sorry, Jonathan, let me interrupt you there.
Sure.
For anybody who might not know, what's a CRM?
Sure. CRM, it's going to be something like HubSpot would be a popular one that you might have heard of, but it's for managing your contacts and companies and sales processes and stuff like that. So kind of the sales and marketing for a business.
Okay. And you, of course, are interested in using such a product because you're a freelancer and you need to manage your freelance leads and such, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I think the thing that made me go, this is stupid, is I want to be able to do sequences out of the CRM with HubSpot. So that's where you send email 1, wait a week, send out email 2, wait a week, send out email 3, without having to click the buttons yourself. And that was on their $500 a month plan. And I'm like, yeah, that's not hard. That's a cron task or something, depending what you're doing. So that's kind of why I started playing around with it. And it's a great project. It just has a ton of weeds and details, and it's something that I could start working on, and I'll never finish it because there's always going to be something else. One of the other things that I had read that I thought was really interesting is what was it? Derek Sivers, CD Baby. He kind of built his own thing, which is a little bit different, but he's been doing his own thing for like 20 years. And I was like, I can do that. So there's just those few things that kind of poked my problem hard enough that I was like, I'm going to start playing with this.
Just curious, how long have you been building this thing?
So it's been like a side project since I think about March.
Oh, okay.
So with where it is right now, I can tie it into an SMTP email service, so I can pull in emails. When it pulls in emails, it looks up the contact information, so that puts those emails with companies and the people who are in it. With the people and companies, I can put in tasks and notes, put in projects and have tasks and notes associated with them as well, and kind of manage a lot of that type of stuff. I actually do use it day to day for a lot of those types of things. I've got some code in place to do automation, so I can do that $500 a month email sequences. I just have to put all this stuff into the database manually. That's actually one of the things I'm working on, is actually building a user interface on top of that right now. And that's kind of there's a million rough edges, but that's kind of some of the major things that I'm working on.
Okay. And for past code reviews, Jonathan, I've usually done it on my computer, but are you okay with sharing your screen and we do it on your computer?
Sure.
Okay. I think I need to enable sharing for you. One moment. Should be good now.
Okay. Maybe what I'll do is I'll share. This is actually my production environment. Just looking at my one contact here, Jason Sweat. You might have heard of him. So I can see I have him in here. I've got his email address, and that's how any emails that come in kind of show up there. I have him hooked up to a company that he's associated with over here, and you can see emails that have come in and notes from some of the meetups. This is actually the notes I've got for today when I was thinking about planning and prepping stuff. So I can go in here and I can put in those details. And one thing I can even do is if I can go in here, I have a share links, and I sent this over to you, Jason, but
Mhm.
if I copy that link and Zoom has disappeared on me. How do I get back to Zoom?
I think you put your cursor at the edge of the screen, one of the edges. Oh, you got it?
Yeah. So if people view that link, this is actually my live notes. And what's neat is even with this, if I come in here and edit the notes, when I save that, that should even update on your side. And that's through the magic of Turbo. But anyways, that's what it kind of looks like. I have my projects in here, people and companies. So a lot of this is just kind of standard CRM-y type stuff. And with all those things, we can put in different dynamic attributes and properties. So you can add your favorite drink or something like that. And also it has global search. So this will go search through contacts, their records, all of the notes and details associated with them and whatnot. So just a lot of the standard CRM type stuff. What's nice about building your own CRM is that you can do stuff like I've got a battle board, and this is coming from there's a guy called Kai Davis. And it's really just kind of a little bit of a spin on Kanban. So this is kind of, I can grab any note, email, task. I can, if I take a step back.
Does the battle board have something to do with tomatoes?
Yeah, it's a Pomodoro thing. That's why there are those tomato emoji.
Okay.
So I'm turning tomatoes into sauce. So if I go into here and I add this to my battle board, I can now see here it's up at the top, and as I work and pull it through, it will let me kind of tackle through it. So the idea behind this is that as emails come in, as tasks come up, I can throw that all up into the battle board, and kind of your battle board is like your thing for today.
Nice.
So this is kind of it really quickly in a nutshell of what's going on there.
Okay.
So,
and I know you had in your notes maybe some specific areas you'd be interested in taking a look at together.
Yeah. So let me pull up. Is it just me, or does it there we go. Impossible to find your screen whenever you try to share screen.
All right.
Okay, so I have a few things in here. And I think you actually mentioned on one of your calls before that you had I don't know if it's a pet peeve or just something you've noticed is poorly named tests in your test suite.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, and actually this is gonna have a couple things that maybe I'll hit on. So when I'm building out, especially right now for where the project is, and actually just take a really small step back. When I wanted to start making a CRM, the name I came up for the project is Crummy. So it's capital CRM, lowercase my. So if I say Crummy, I'm not necessarily talking about code quality or anything like that. It's the name of the project. Terrible program humor. So for where things are right now, most of the project is very CRUD based and getting a lot of the kind of those main models in where they belong. So the way that I usually will tackle this is by building out a feature test where I kind of walk through the interface I want, and then kind of building it out until there's no more errors. So for example, I have a feature here: users can manage projects. So with that, I create the user, I sign in, I select the account that when you first sign in, it asks you what account, because you can have sign in for multiple accounts. You click on projects, you add a project, you fill in its name, create. Then you can click on the project because you can go into it, you can edit it, you can change the name, and then it's going to have the new project name on the page. So basically kind of walking through that whole kind of suite of going from you have no project to you can create, edit, and still see that project.
Okay. Okay. Well, Jonathan, I'm going to dispense with all tact and politeness, and I'll give
Please
you a
do.
critique of this test. So users can manage projects. Manage is about the vaguest verb in the world, and so whenever I see that, it's like, well, what does it mean to manage it? And then successfully, the question there is like, well, what does successfully mean?
Yep.
And then I look at the various steps, and the steps are sufficiently low level that I have to synthesize the broader meaning from these low level steps. Another way to put that is maybe that these steps are, well, there's maybe kind of a lack of abstraction.
Mm-hmm.
So having said that, maybe let's talk about what we could do to improve this if you want to focus on this one in particular.
Yeah, let's may I request a direction that we go to?
Yeah.
With that, by bringing up this very different test called nope, wrong one. Users can manage, say, companies.
Okay. And Jonathan, would you mind making your font size just like a little bit bigger?
Absolutely can. Maybe I cannot.
Command plus doesn't do it, does it?
No, it's not doing that.
Yeah.
There is not a shortcut for that.
Wow, that's surprising.
There probably is. I just don't know what it is because I never have to change it for myself.
Yeah.
Give me a second to click through the menu 15 times.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me when to stop.
Yeah, maybe one more and that's good.
All right.
Okay.
And it did it for one screen only.
Oh no. Yeah,
Here,
I think I saw another menu item that said do it for everything, but I guess this is good enough for now.
you know what I can do? Give me one sec.
Mm-hmm. Trying to think if I have an entertaining anecdote to fill this little spot of time with. Yeah, you do that, Jonathan, and I'll sit over here and be entertaining for a moment. Here's how we can fill the time. We had a late joiner, Amar. Amar, welcome.
Hi, Jason. How are you?
Good. How about you?
I'm good.
I think if I recall correctly, you've been here before. Is that right?
Yep. I've been in one of your session before.
And you're located in India?
No, Pakistan, Karachi.
Ah, is it like Australian people and New Zealanders where people get really mad when you mistake them for the other?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's like, oh,
No,
you're
I
from
don't.
India. No, I'm from Pakistan, damn it.
No, I don't mind
Yeah.
because yeah, people always confuse Pakistani people with Indian or the other way. But
Well,
yes, doesn't
you used to
matter.
all be kind of one country, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Then those dang Brits, they just drew that arbitrary line.
Uh-huh. I
Yeah.
don't know much about history, but yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. I don't know much about it either, other than everybody knows the Brits came in there and did their colonial business. Anyway, good to have you here this evening.
Thank you.
Okay, Jonathan, you got your font
Yeah, they got
size
things
figured
figured
out?
out.
Okay.
So you'll notice if I hop over from the users can manage project specs to the users can manage company spec, you might notice some similarities.
Yeah.
So yes, doing some abstractions can definitely be beneficial and whatnot there.
Yeah, okay. So if we're looking at users can manage projects first,
Mhm.
I just want to kind of try to understand what's happening here. So select projects, add project, create project, my project, edit. Oh, okay. So this is a test that I think kind of tests, it exercises multiple features. Do I have that right?
Yeah, so that's actually one of the things I was going to ask. So with this, I'm kind of walking through kind of A to Z of creating and editing a project. So this is definitely a larger thing where I'm kind of testing a whole feature of, can you make projects? But this could definitely be easily broken into creating a project, editing a project, and then the follow-ups would of course be archiving it or whatnot.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I have a guideline for myself, which is sometimes people talk about like you should only have one assertion per test.
Mhm.
I think that's a bit imprecise. I think it's good to have each test should just be about one thing. And then there's, of course, the question of, well, what constitutes one thing?
Mhm.
And that's kind of a subjective judgment. But to me, this is not about one thing. It's about more than one thing. So let's do this. First, Jonathan, are you a Chat GPT guy?
Not for coding,
No?
not really.
Um, would you humor me and plug this into Chat GPT and see what we get?
Sure can.
Do you have version 4?
Yes, I do.
Okay, great. Yeah, so what I would suggest is that we copy this whole file and say, separate this into multiple test cases. And maybe we can just start with that and see what we get.
All right.
Yeah, and I found with testing and a lot of other things, ChatGPT is good for delegating grunt work to, but it's not smart enough to do, it's not smart enough to like do the right thing without you telling it. So sometimes we have to be very specific.
All right. I'll copy over what it gives me in a sec.
Okay. Do you have the GPT? Okay, yeah. Okay. Yeah, this is like not exactly how I would have done it, but it's not too far off.
No, because I know the system, I would pull that select. That's just when you pick your account.
Oh, okay.
But this actually was kind of where I was going to be saying, but to break this into, this is kind of your sign in stuff. But then, yeah, I did break that to even breaking this way. It would be kind of breaking it something like that, which is what ended up, which is close to what I ended up doing here.
Okay. Yeah, and that first one, user can navigate to project management section. That's something I probably wouldn't write a test for because it's like that gets exercised in the course of other things. And it's a means to an end. It's not an end in itself. And so if I were you, I'd just kill that one.
I could debate you on that in a minute. So that's interesting.
Oh, okay. User can add a project. I feel like if we get in the habit of using that kind of language, like there's almost nothing that couldn't be prefixed with user can. So the way I would normally word such a thing is like adding a project. Okay, projects, add project, fill in name with my project. Yeah, okay. Editing project, yeah. And then for editing a project, mainly for the sake of understandability, I wouldn't, and for efficiency, for like performance reasons, I wouldn't create a project through the UI. I would use FactoryBot to create the project. Well, I think you can just do like visit, edit project path, project.id, something like that.
So that's what I was going to ask. So, and especially with killing that. So yeah, let's talk about the editing here. So we create the project. So yeah, we could do visit project. Sorry, edit project path. If I can type. So you'd probably end up with something like this.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and okay, you had a thought on the user can navigate to project management section test.
Yeah. So if we do this down here, then I would be kind of inclined here to have visit project
Yeah,
new project path.
exactly.
But then I wonder, so at this point, we could have both these things pass, but I don't have it in the menu anywhere because I forgot to put it in the menu, and the test didn't fail on me. So there's a whole thing. Don't write any code if we go to that extreme without a failing test that drives you to do it. So this here would pass, but there's no menu button that says projects and then the add project button.
Yeah. Yeah. So sorry, I just got to say this because it bugged me. I think line 19 is not needed anymore. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So yeah, you're totally right. Like in theory, the project index page could get broken and these tests would still pass. Well, is that true? The expect page to have content my project, well, it depends on where that goes to, whether it goes to the index or it goes to the show page. But in any way, let's say it goes to the show page or something. In that case, the index could get totally broken and these tests would still pass. And therefore, it could be argued that it's good to have a test that visits the index page. And I have not much of a valid argument against that, except kind of this. I tend not to write tests for like the kinds of mistakes that I never ever make. And in the entire history of me doing Rails for the last like 12 years or whatever, like I've never, maybe once or twice ever, but I think more like never, have I broken an index page in production. And that's the kind of thing where like if you do, somebody like a human is going to immediately notice it. And it's like super easy to fix. But again, it like is not the kind of mistake I ever make. So to me, the fact that the mistake never gets made translates that it's not even worth the cost of me taking the like 2 minutes to write a test for that thing. Having said that, if anybody wrote that test, I couldn't validly argue against it because all the logic points to that it's logical to have such a test.
Okay. So when I'm this test here is kind of my thought process of me thinking through the user interface of what would take me from A to Z.
Mm-hmm.
So that's usually where I kind of start with one of these feature tests. And that's why I have a incredibly clarifying scenario like successfully.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, this is kind of like my brain spitting out, how do I get this on the screen? This to me is a very reasonable refactor where we've broken it down. Yeah, so to me, this looks like a good place to kind of, this is probably where I would go if this was a customer project where I wanted to actually kind of work through things and do things well and properly. This is definitely where I'd probably ending up. as kind of that first stab of a reasonable, good feature test.
Mhm.
So where I would kind of be thinking next is kind of like, and this is what I see in almost every tutorial, and then a person going through, how do I do feature tests? It ends up with something either here where they've stopped on kind of that version 1, or here where they have a refactored version 2.
Mhm.
So with this project, if Crummy was going to be actually put out to production, have customers, absolutely they're going to start to ask me for things like permissions and things like that. So this is where kind of projecting forward, if I have a request coming in or a feature that I'm building out where I can say have permissions on projects where
Mhm.
user A can see stuff, user B can't see stuff.
Mhm.
That to me is probably where we doing more tests on the index screen might be appropriate.
Yes, totally agreed.
So for that, I would probably be seeing this be a totally different feature where it's, users can have different permissions for projects, and that's where we'd go through the details of that. Would you use that as well?
Yeah, I mean, that sort of feature can be implemented in such a wide range of ways that it's hard to say exactly how I would do the test for those. But in a lot of cases for permissions related stuff, I actually I use request specs rather than feature specs or system specs. The reason being that system specs are good because they exercise the whole stack and let you know that your entire stack is working together. But for cases where the whole stack is not really necessary, like for permissions related stuff, like you want to assert that unauthorized users can't see the things they're not supposed to see, and beyond the like 400 response that they get, you don't really care the details of what they see. And kind of the same thing for people who get a 200 response. You mainly just care like, can they get in or can they not? And involving the UI is kind of superfluous. And so that's why I usually do those at the request spec level to avoid the overhead of involving the UI.
Yeah, that's probably a bad example, because even if that were the case, I'd probably be using pundit or can or something like that. That's going to put it down at a model level anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. I'm just looking through the notes that I did have. So with this, I guess the other thing to ask is, yeah, if users can manage projects, which you bristled at appropriately. So what would you call this feature?
I just call it projects.
Okay. So with that, so projects, I can see this being naturally will grow from, you have adding a project, editing a project. You'll probably have archiving a project. But if there was, so one of the things that I can do is projects can be merged together. And I do have that as a separate feature, but if this is just called projects, that makes me want to kind of stick merging projects into here, which probably is a bad idea.
It all depends. Like, just like a man, a project goes through different seasons of life. And so, this is at the springtime of its life or whatever. And so when things are small, like you can afford to have your categories be loose and stuff. Like if you threw merging into here and that was just another test that was just like a chunk in comparable size to the ones that are already here, like that's not a big deal. But when you start getting to the point where this file is like 300 lines long, then that's like not so nice anymore, because now you can't just look at the file and understand what's going on at a glance. And you can't really tell, like, well, how do I decide whether something belongs in here or doesn't belong in here? And so at this early stage, I probably wouldn't worry too much. But then at a later stage, it may well be the case that I decide to create a dedicated file just for that merging functionality.
Actually, most of the merging stuff is actually in a model anyways. It's just the UI. So it probably, actually, I might not even have one. Oh, no, because I do a bunch of, yeah. I do have, you can merge companies as well, obviously.
Okay.
But okay.
Yeah, and I'll say something else about that too. At my last job, our app grew to such complexity that we originally had, like, okay, let's say, oh, here's a great example. We had an entity called appointment in our scheduling system. Maybe that started out just like this, where we had a system spec labeled appointments, and it was just a CRUD for appointments. But then it got so complex that it was justifiable and arguably necessary to have a test just for the creation of an appointment, because there were so many different permutations of just creating an appointment. And then same thing with editing, that had its own test file. So like each of the 4 CRUD actions ended up having its own dedicated file because there was just so much stuff to each one.
Right. So with that, you would have on day 1, you had appointments spec. You'd have your appointments feature spec. And then down the road, you'd split that out into editing appointments, creating appointments, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like something that I didn't used to think about much is like, what's the right way to do this? It's like, well, I don't know. It depends on like what stage everything is at. Because again, when everything's small, you can afford to be sloppy and it's still totally fine. And indeed, when things are small, like it would be premature to try to organize things too much because you don't know yet where it hurts. It's only until there's a lot of stuff that you can start feeling the pains that can guide you toward how to organize things.
For the sake of argument, let's say we do want to include this, and just using this as an example, where we do navigate to the index page. This click on projects match first. That match first is because there's a desktop nav and a mobile navigation that both have a projects. So if we don't include match first, this screams at us about having multiple matches. When in places where JavaScript isn't turned on, or it's not using JavaScript, which you had no insight into because you didn't build it. So I could easily do inside of here something like within nav, do click, something like that. And that would let me get rid of that match first, and probably gives you a little bit more insight. But one of the things that it's on my to-do list is something like I don't know, click menu. If I can type projects, which at least gives you much more insight into what that actually is doing. Or even click nav probably would be something like that, where this is actually something that I've pulled out into a support file or something like that.
Yeah. So
for this, that to me is probably a pretty clear win for the test suite, especially as I pull that through everywhere that's appropriate. Do you have any heuristics about when you would make this type of transformation inside of something like feature tests specifically?
Yeah. So the way it was originally, where it said click the first one or whatever, that's obviously like an incidental detail. And to somebody like me looking at it for the first time, it's a total mystery. And maybe it's a bit of it's an obstacle to understanding. And that's obviously bad. But again, early on, you can afford to be, I hate to say you can afford to be sloppy. That sounds blamey, but like you can afford to have imperfections like that, because it doesn't cost very much. And the question isn't, does it cost something or not? Does it cost something? The question is, does it cost more or less than the alternative? And like to go and create a page, well, to go and create some nicer way of having this so you don't have to have the match first thing at this stage, like the cost of that seems to exceed the cost of just dealing with the match first thing. So I'd probably leave that alone for now. But when it, let's say it did get to a point where I decided that it made sense to add that, I would probably add a page object. And if anybody wants to look that up, I think Martin Fowler has a nice article on page objects. It's a slightly deceptive name because a page object isn't something that represents an entire page. It's something that represents an element on the page or an area of a page. Anyway, Jonathan, what were those two navs that you have?
There's a desktop nav and a mobile.
Okay. Yeah, so I would have maybe like desktop nav dot click projects or mobile nav dot click projects, something like that.
Okay. Something along those lines.
Yeah, I think so.
So I threw I know that Thoughtbot had some stuff about page objects. I just threw a link into that to that. Okay. So with that, yeah, I think it's pretty clear for me.
Okay. And by the way, you guys will be one of the first people to hear about this. I got an email today from this guy, Josh Clayton. He was one of the guys who worked on FactoryBot, and he created this gem apparently recently called Page EZ, page underscore EZ. So if you just Google like Page EZ gem, apparently that's a gem for creating page objects. So you can go give that a look and see what you think of it. Anyway, what do we want to look at next?
So this might be not necessarily code specifically. So when you're thinking about models, controllers, and routes, trying to think through my question for a sec.
Mm-hmm.
When you're thinking about models, controllers, and routes, is there any general heuristics that you use to kind of decide how those should be organized? So for example, let's say you have, let's say you're doing billing. So you're going to have something like a billing account or something like that. And those might be those could be maybe a root level object, or it could be something that's inside of where you'd have like billing / something as your namespace. But then when you also have it in your user interface, you might have settings / billing / account where you can go in there and do stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, do you try to manage a consistency between those, or yeah, like would you have a settings module with billing something inside of there?
Yeah, good question. I have this article that I wrote some time ago. It was called like Organizing Rails Apps by Domain Concept or something like that. But I definitely am a big fan of namespaces you could
Mhm.
kind of say namespaces or modules interchangeably because it like
Yep.
is kind of two sides of the same coin. I'll give a couple concrete examples. Again, at my last job, it was a medical app, and you said billing. We did in fact have some billing related stuff. That was a huge area of it. And so we had a handful of like top level namespaces. Scheduling was definitely one, billing was one, clinical was one, and then inside of those were a number of others. And for each one, like, okay, we had app, billing, and then maybe some models just right at that top level inside of billing. And I would mirror my controllers, models, and views. So it'd be like app models billing, app controllers billing, app views billing, and so forth. And then same thing with any nested models. And then it also made sense sometimes to like have the same concepts appear inside of different namespaces. Like, for example, we had app models scheduling. Sorry, I'll say app model schedule appointment. And then we had app models billing appointment. Scratch that, wrong example. Let me say it over again. App controllers schedule appointment, app controllers billing appointment. Because there's only one appointment module, but sometimes it's like you care about an appointment from a schedule perspective, and sometimes you care about it from a billing perspective. And you don't care about the temporal aspects when you're looking at it from a billing perspective, and you don't care about the monetary aspects when you're looking at it from a schedule perspective. And so it's just looking at the same entity through different lenses.
So it sounds like your recommendation is your models should be structured according to the appropriate domain concepts.
Yeah, that's how I like to do it.
But your routes and your controllers they likely will be associated as well, but that is not necessarily true at all. You might have, for example, app/model/appointment, which has all of your domain concepts and stuff for the appointment itself. And then you might have billings appointment, which might be a module you mix in or something. But you wouldn't have, but you're going to have controllers schedule appointments. And that's going to be, this is inside of that, this other schedule namespace. Whereas your model, and that's probably, I'm assuming you're going to have a route that's something at, you're going to have schedule/appointments for your route. So your routes and your controllers are going to have that relationship, but your models are not beholden to that.
Yeah, and I'm remembering now that appointment in particular, it was app models appointment. It was such, because it's like it might have even started out as like app model schedule appointment, but at some point I would have realized that appointment is a multifaceted concept. And so it doesn't make sense to label it as a scheduling thing or a billing thing, because it's like that like bias isn't there. Like the concept of an appointment is agnostic to whether it's being viewed in a billing context or a scheduling context or whatever. We want it to be like blank in that aspect because we want to be able to look at it in through whatever different kind of lens we want.
Now, would you split out some of that domain stuff into like a module that you might mix in something like appointment billing, where the appointment billing is kind of all there?
Those last two lines, I don't understand what they, oh, I see what, okay, no. That would be way too broad to me. Oh, and I don't have the code like super handy that I could just look, but no, that's too broad. I would have things instead like, I can't think of examples, but like the finer grained domain concepts, I would have objects for each of those. Oh, here's some examples. Like this isn't necessarily super appointment related, but I would have like app, model, schedule, calendar item, or schedule item, app, model, schedule item. And schedule item was like an agnostic concept where like an appointment was connected to a schedule item. We had these things called appointment blocks where it was like this slot is blocked off. You can't schedule a thing in here, and a block had a schedule item. And those ones were app model schedule item.
Okay.
Yeah, it was like app model schedule item, app model schedule appointment block, if you're curious about that other one.
So, and then when you actually get into those, the controllers associated with them would be probably something like app controllers, schedule item maybe, or even just maybe stay at the schedule item.
Well, schedule item in particular had no controller.
Okay.
Yeah, because that was just, there was an appointment blocks controller, but schedule item was just a device that enabled it was the way of drawing up appointments and appointments and appointment blocks and any other thing that appeared on the schedule. Those things all had a schedule item record.
Okay.
And that way, like anything could be endowed with repeatability, and like anything that is schedule item, anything that's like common to anything that could be a schedule item at all. Yep. I didn't want to have to like have that repeated in a bunch of places from a data perspective. That's why there was that separate database record for those types of things.
Crummy does not have repeating tasks currently because I don't want to. Mm-hmm. Because repeating things, scheduling those out is a little bit of a nightmare.
Well, and plus, I'd rather just do it once. I don't want to have to do something over and over.
Well, you'd have to take out the trash every week.
Not me. I did it once in 1998. No more.
When we have stuff like that, I'm like, that's why I have kids.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
The ultimate cron task.
That'd make a good shirt for like giving out at conferences or something. Kids, the ultimate cron task.
Your cron tasks are sound more reliable than mine. That you call them the ultimate.
I was thinking those cron tasks seem to cause a lot of work in my queue. I don't know about y'all, but
yeah.
That is true.
If you go to a parenting conference, that's where you can wear a shirt like that and you can find who your people are.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Okay. So yeah, these are a few examples. And just because I'm curious now, I'm going to see if I can really quickly pull up some of this stuff. Oh, where the heck would it be? Oh, that's not it.
Maybe while you're doing that, I'll ask, does anyone have a question for me or want to see something?
I'm curious just to see your routes, Jonathan.
So this is where you get into seeing some kind of scattered going through things. So you can see I do throw to-dos to shallow everything. But yeah, that's kind of what we're looking at.
Yeah, something that I found really useful, and again, this is like a seasons of life kind of thing. As my routes file grew, I found it nice to split it up into multiple files.
Mhm.
Okay, would anyone care to hazard a guess as to how many individual files I found just now in the app model schedule folder?
How old is the project?
How old is the project? 4 years?
I'll go for a dozen.
Okay.
I was going to say 8.
All right.
I'm going to
Answer?
say
Yeah.
3 dozen.
Oh, okay. You're the closest, John.
Whoa, really?
It's
Wow.
53.
Whoa.
Yeah. So, uh-huh.
What are some examples of what they do?
Good question. First I'll just like blindly read off a few. There's holiday, disallowed interval, create appointment, schedule item, disallowed interval applicability, schedule note, availability block factory, availability block. And then there's namespaces within the schedule namespace. We have a schedule appointment slots namespace, because there's a lot of logic around there. There's 2 other namespaces inside a schedule called by month calendar and by day calendar. And inside of by month calendar, for example, I have objects like month and week, location filter, day, scheduled group count, display group. So these are very fine-grained objects, and very few of them have a database table behind
Database.
them.
That just occurred to me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, the scheduling component of this application was very complex.
Big.
Yeah.
How many violations of Sandy Metz rules do you have?
Probably more than 0. What are the rules? Like no model file more than 100 lines. I don't remember the other ones.
The 2 I think that help the if you're not familiar with Sandy Metz rules, Sandy Metz does a lot of writing and speaking, but she's got some rules. So classes can be no longer than 100 lines. Methods can be no longer than 5 lines. And that's including like if you have a if something else something end, that's 5 lines. Controllers can only instantiate 1 object and pass no more than 4 parameters, including hash options. And I don't think that they're perfect rules, but I think they push you in a right direction.
I would agree with that statement. Yeah, because like to me, it's like some ideas are more densely complex than others. And so like for a concept that's really densely complex, maybe like 20 lines is the max that you can like fit into your brain when you look at it. And other things are like so conceptually not dense that you can look at a 400 line file and it's like, okay, it's just like all this stuff. Like I get it. It's kind of flat. It's not very like mind bending.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, I think, and I'm sure Sandy herself realizes this, but like that idea of a 100 line limit, like 99 lines is okay, 101 lines is bad, like that's not exactly the thing. It's the complexity, the difficulty of understanding.
Yeah, like I've got a theme object which just has a whole bunch of CSS classes for Typewind.
Right.
So if you so if you look at some of those, a lot of them are just like, here's a bunch of classes, and it's to make sure that I'm kind of reusing it appropriately. You can look at that and you're just like, okay, this is a whole bunch of CSS classes. This chunk is for a button, a menu, whatever. So that's not complex. And if you're looking to make a change in there, it's easy to see this is a button. Whereas if you looked at your scheduling code, I'm betting that if you did it naively, you also have this 100-line method of spaghetti, and you'd be like, I don't know what's going on here. And that's where you're like, oh, that's because this is 5 objects that should be broken out.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the size of a file is kind of a proxy. And the thing I am articulating now what the thing is, it's how cognitively demanding the content of the file is. I wish we had a unit called like a cognoid or something like that. You can have a max of 5 cognoids, but I don't think that's measurable.
Please trademark that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I wish I could be like 37 Signals and share production code with you and show you this code from my last job, but I'm not at liberty to do that. Anyway, I see that we're kind of at the 1 hour mark. So Jonathan, thanks so much for doing this. I really enjoy when people come and share their code and we can have something to talk about. I don't have to prepare anything to talk about. That makes my life easy. So as many times as you want to do this, Jonathan, I'm up for it. And the rest of you guys, if any of you want to bring some code for a side project or whatever, I am more than happy to do one of these for you. Jason at codewithjason.com is how you can get a hold of me. Just email me and say, hey, do a code review for me, and we'll figure out all the details.
And if any of you want to give me $500 a month for almost working email sequences, let me know.
There we go. You're a born marketer, Jonathan. Okay. Thank you everyone for coming, and I will see you next time.
Good night.
Take care.
Thanks.
Nice.